In the quiet town of Lugoff, South Carolina, a 14-year-old girl stepped off her school bus, unaware that a predator was watching her every move. What happened next would shock the nation. A tale of horror, resilience, and a daring escape that defied all odds. This is the true story of Elizabeth Shoffe, the girl who outsmarted her captor and survived 10 days in a booby-trapped underground bunker. Buckle up, because this story is as chilling as it gets. It was September 6, 2006, a warm afternoon in Lugoff, a sleepy community of just 7,000 people. Elizabeth Shoffe, a bright and spirited 9th grader, had just started high school. She was excited about her new boyfriend, her classes, and the promise of a fresh chapter in her life. But as she walked the short distance from her bus stop to her home, surrounded by dense woods, she had no idea that danger was lurking just beyond the tree line. Vincent Filiaw, a 36-year-old former construction worker, was a wanted man. He'd been on the run since November 2005, accused of molesting his ex-girlfriend's 12-year-old daughter. Filiaw was cunning, manipulative, and dangerously intelligent. For months, he'd been hiding in the woods, building a network of underground bunkers, makeshift prisons rigged with explosives and stocked with supplies. His latest creation, a 6-foot-deep, 8-by-8-foot bunker, complete with a bed, a stove, a television, and a camouflage door. This was no ordinary hideout. It was a torture chamber designed for one purpose: to trap his next victim. As Elizabeth approached her driveway, Filiaw emerged from the bushes, dressed in combat fatigues and a fake police badge. He approached her with a chilling calmness, claiming to be a sheriff's deputy. "You're under arrest," he told her, accusing her family of growing marijuana, an absurd lie meant to confuse the teenager. Before she could process what was happening, he slapped handcuffs on her wrists and led her into the dense forest. Elizabeth's heart raced as Filiaw marched her deeper into the woods, weaving a disorienting path to ensure she couldn't find her way back. Sensing the danger, she dropped her shoes along the trail, a desperate breadcrumb trail she hoped someone would find. After what felt like an eternity, Filiaw stopped and brushed aside leaves to reveal a hidden door in the forest floor. "Climb in," he ordered. Elizabeth, terrified, realized this could be her grave, but she had no choice. She descended into the darkness. Inside the bunker, the air was thick with dread. The space was claustrophobic, barely large enough for 2 people. Filiaw padlocked the door and immediately began his sadistic torment. He stripped Elizabeth of her clothes, chained her by the neck, and subjected her to repeated sexual assaults. For the next 10 days, her life became a nightmare of unimaginable cruelty. "I just didn't know what to do," Elizabeth later recalled. "I was scared I was going to die." Back in Lugoff, Elizabeth's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. Her mother, Madeline Shoffe, knew something was terribly wrong when her daughter didn't come home from school. "I would stand in the empty lot across the street at night, hoping to feel her presence," Madeline later told NBC News. The Kershaw County Sheriff's Office launched a massive search, with hundreds of volunteers and officers combing miles of dense woodland. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and search dogs scoured the area. But there was no trace of Elizabeth. The police initially suspected she might have run away, and no Amber Alert was issued, a decision that would later haunt the investigation. Down in the bunker, Elizabeth endured unspeakable horrors. Filiaw assaulted her multiple times a day, threatening to harm her younger brother if she tried to escape. The bunker was rigged with crude explosives, making any attempt to flee a deadly gamble. But Elizabeth was no ordinary victim. Despite her fear, her mind was sharp, and she began to devise a plan to survive. She knew she had to outsmart her captor if she was going to make it out alive. Elizabeth started to play a dangerous psychological game. She worked to gain Philios' trust, pretending to empathize with him and acting compliant to avoid further violence. She'd pull strands of her hair and place them on branches outside the bunker when Filio let her out briefly, hoping search dogs would pick up her scent. Her resilience was remarkable for a 14-year-old facing such evil. "I had to stay strong," she later said. "I couldn't let him break me." After 10 grueling days, Elizabeth saw her chance. Filio, growing careless, let her borrow his cell phone to play games. But Elizabeth had other plans. While he slept, she quietly typed a text to her mother. "I'm in a hole. Please help me." She held the phone outside the bunker's door to catch a signal and hit send. That single message would change everything. The text reached Madeleine Schoaf, who immediately alerted the police. At first, Sheriff Steve McCaskill thought it might be a hoax. "It was either a breakthrough or someone playing a cruel prank," recalled investigator David Tomley. But Filio's ex-girlfriend provided a critical lead: his cell phone number. Using local cell towers, authorities began triangulating the bunker's location. Time was running out, and Elizabeth's life hung in the balance. Inside the bunker, Filio grew increasingly paranoid. He watched news reports on his battery-powered TV, realizing the search was closing in. "They're getting closer," he muttered to Elizabeth, his voice laced with panic. He began packing supplies, preparing to flee with her in tow. But Elizabeth stalled him, feigning illness to buy time. Every minute felt like an eternity as she prayed the police would arrive before he dragged her deeper into the woods. Meanwhile, the triangulation efforts paid off. On September 16, 2006, just 10 days after her abduction, a team of SWAT officers and deputies zeroed in on a signal pinging from the dense forest. They moved silently through the underbrush, guided by the faint glow of Filio's phone. As they approached the camouflaged door, they heard muffled voices from below. With hearts pounding, they signaled for silence and prepared to breach. The lead officer whispered into his radio, "We've got a visual on the entrance. Suspect inside with the victim." In a swift, coordinated move, they lifted the door and shouted, "Police! Come out with your hands up!" Filio, caught off guard, froze for a split second before surrendering without a fight. He crawled out, hands raised, as officers swarmed him. Down below, Elizabeth blinked into the sunlight, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered, as rescuers helped her to safety. The rescue was a media frenzy. News helicopters hovered overhead, capturing the dramatic extraction. Elizabeth was rushed to a hospital, where doctors confirmed she had survived physical trauma but would need extensive counseling for the psychological scars. Filio was arrested on the spot, charged with kidnapping, rape, and a litany of other felonies. In court, he showed no remorse, claiming Elizabeth had consented to the ordeal, a lie that enraged everyone who heard it. Elizabeth's bravery didn't end with her escape. She testified against Filio in a trial that gripped the nation. Describing the horrors in graphic detail, she faced her captor head-on, her voice steady despite the nightmares. The jury didn't take long to convict him. In 2008, Filio was sentenced to 435 years in prison, virtually a life term. "I hope you rot in hell," Elizabeth told him as he was led away, her words echoing the raw fury of a survivor reclaiming her power. But the story doesn't stop at justice. Elizabeth's experience transformed her. Today, she's an advocate for missing children, speaking out about the importance of Amber Alerts and swift police action. She wrote a book, 10 Days in a Madhouse? No, 10 Days in a Bunker, sharing her story to empower others. "I was just a kid, but I found strength I didn't know I had," she says. Her mother, Madeleine, became a fierce activist too, pushing for better search protocols in rural areas. Let's dive deeper into the psychology of this nightmare. Philyaw wasn't just a random monster. He was a calculated predator who preyed on the isolation of small-town life. His bunkers were like something out of a horror movie, complete with tripwires connected to homemade bombs made from household chemicals and nails. Experts later called it a survivalist's wet dream turned serial killer's lair. He'd scouted the area for months, choosing Elizabeth because she walked alone. The fake cop routine? A classic ruse, preying on a teen's respect for authority. Elizabeth's survival tactics were textbook, even if she didn't know it at the time. Psychologists praise her for what they call Stockholm light. Not full-blown sympathy, but enough manipulation to stay alive. She mirrored his rants about the government, nodding along to de-escalate. When he forced her to watch explicit videos on that tiny TV, she dissociated, mentally escaping to thoughts of her family and school friends. "I pictured my dog waiting for me at home," she revealed in interviews. That mental fortress kept her sane. The search effort, though massive, had its flaws. Over 300 volunteers combed 20 square miles, but the woods were thick with vines and swamps. One searcher found Elizabeth's shoes but dismissed them as litter. No Amber Alert meant no nationwide media blast early on. When it finally came, tips flooded in, but it was that text message that cracked the case. Cell phone pings in 2006 weren't as precise as today's GPS, but in rural Kershaw County, the signal bounced off just a few towers, enough to narrow it to a half-mile radius. Imagine the tension in those final hours. Philyaw, sweating bullets, tried to convince Elizabeth to run with him. "We could be together forever," he said, deluded by his own twisted fantasy.